So our final presentation in this session is Human AI Teams That Train With You, Embodied Agents for Performance and Readiness, given by Mr. Sylvain Bruni. Sylvain is a Principal Engineer and Division Director for Performance Augmentation Systems at Aptima. He supervises a portfolio of efforts focused on developing and deploying human AI teaming systems for defense and healthcare applications from cockpit to clinic. Mr. Bruni's technical work is rooted in human factors and cognitive systems engineering to deliver decision advantage and operational health and safety to a variety of DoD, U.S. government, and commercial customers. He is a member of the NATO Industrial Advisory Group and a former study team lead for the SG-278 study on cognitive augmentation for military applications, emerging technologies. So please welcome to the stage Sylvain.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Thank you for sticking out for the last part of this session. As our community is developing and deploying and maturing more human AI teams, I see two major disconnects that we're going to have to face very soon. The first one is the disconnect between how we support the mind and the body of our warfighters, the cognitive and the physical augmentation. The second big gap is in how we translate what is happening in training to operations, how our human AI teams that are being built in training actually are also performing together in operations. My background, as Brian said, is all in cognitive engineering, and for 2 decades I've built decision support systems that are meant to provide decision advantage to our warfighters. As I acquired some management experience in the company, now I oversee a portfolio of operational health and safety work that is really about the physical enhancement of our warfighters. And we have internally this Superman slide where we show how the different projects and the different technologies that we build support different parts of the human body to make every warfighter a Superman. And it's come to me that really we have a big divide in the way we do this. We have a neck up versus neck down separation of the technologies that are meant to support the brain and support cognitive augmentation versus those that are more in the physical realm to support physical augmentation. And that needs to be reconciled because science tells us that the two are very intimately linked. There is a seminal 2009 study that shows that after 90 minutes of intense cognitive effort, your physical capacity is greatly diminished and you reach a point of exhaustion much faster than otherwise. And that is because your brain is transferring this perception of effort from the cognitive to the physical space. And we also have the reverse. A number of studies between 2007 and 2022 done by the DoD show that for our soldiers carrying heavy loads, that has an impact on their cognitive abilities. And we've seen decrements in vigilance, in target detection, and in general decision-making after those extensive periods of time where they would be carrying a large physical load. So the two are related, but our technologies are not. The way we do augmentation is separate. At the same time, coming from an operational support perspective, I'm always amazed by the amount of data collected in training. So we have a lot of companies off the floor that shows a number of simulators, a number of techniques by which we measure every single move of the warfighter in their simulation, in their training operations. Particularly as we are deploying human AI systems, we know exactly how the humans are engaging with those non-human agents in the system. We collect a massive amount of data. But that data is not made available to the AI in operations to be leveraged to optimize performance at that time. So there is a clear divide because, to me, pushing training without a transfer of that data and those insights into operations is like rehearsing for a symphony with a different orchestra. It's not going to go well. And I believe that we can reconcile those two gaps by bringing together what I call the concept of a cognosomatic loop. So cognitive, somatic, the physical, and a loop between training and operations. And one embodiment of that are embodied agents that can actually train with you and then deploy with you and have this continuity of readiness across those different cognitive versus physical and training versus operational boundaries. So there are 4 big pillars for cognosomatics. First one is human sensing. Then we have the sensing of the environment and the systems, agentic AI, and digital twins. Now, on the human sensing side, we've heard a lot today about it. It was phenomenal. I'm not going to belabor the point. There are a number of sensors that can be worn, wearables, the fabric-oriented. I'll put a note on the socks that measure your ankle strain. That is important in certain use cases. So there are a wide variety of devices that touch the human that can collect those biosignals and biomarkers that can tell you a lot about their cognitive and physical state at the same time. There are also remote or contactless types of sensors that we've started employing actually for sleep measurement, but also for understanding cardiography through radar-based or ballistocardiogram or even pupillometry at a distance without really intruding on the human. We can also measure behavioral patterns of engagement that the warfighters have with their system. So key logging has been a very effective way of understanding and predicting the workflow and the task that warfighters actually perform when they engage in human AI teams. Now, on the machine side, we can measure the more traditional things like vibration and heat and how that is contextualized by the maintenance cycle of a particular platform. But we can also measure now with embodied AI agents in software infrastructures how those systems actually work, how they are close or not to the boundaries of operations that they were designed for, and really understand whether the system itself is performing well within the context of what they're supposed to do with the warfighter. An additional aspect to that is the environment and sensing, the mission out there. For example, terrain, how that terrain might be changing, or air quality, which has a direct impact, obviously, on the breathing of our warfighters. So there are multi-layers and multi-modes by which we can get a very deep and rich picture of all of those aspects that have an influence on the human at the cognitive and the physical level. Now, how do we bring all of that together? And I think that would address some of the questions that were asked earlier. Agentic AI and the approach that is called compound AI systems can actually be a promising way of merging all of that information and making sense of it in an automated fashion, where actually you don't need necessarily a dashboard to present to another human, but you can have AI itself look at that. So multiple agents that analyze and transform or translate the physical information, the cognitive information, all of those biosignals and biomarkers into valuable information about attention, about situational awareness, vigilance, fatigue, and all of those things in the context of operations or in the context of training as they are done. I didn't even mention exoskeletons, which is another area where we've done a bit of work, but the same physical capture of data and then translation into agentic AI actually works there as well. So you can have all of those agents working and reasoning together. You add one more layer of moderation and orchestration of all of that compound AI system. And that can be the embodied AI agent that is interacting and engaging directly with the warfighter. And we've done a little bit of research in that domain as well. The fourth component, more novel, but I would assume a lot of folks are familiar with machine digital twins, a digital replica of a complex process or a complex piece of equipment that can be used to track and model and monitor how a specific thing is actually working. Well, we are getting very close to having the same thing feasible for humans. There is some research that has been done by some of my colleagues on how you have a human digital twin of perception, of emotion, of effect, of reaction to certain kinds of information, including information overload. There is a team in a university in the US that has been doing a human digital twin of the heart at an organ level understanding of how that system works and basically drives performance as well for the warfighter. We have a team in Italy that is looking at the cellular level modeling of blood flow inside the human body. So you have this very, very intricate understanding of the vascular system, which is important if you're talking about oxygenation, for example, and how that influences performance. All of those things together can actually be brought into a single embodied AI agent that works directly with the warfighter. So this is what could look like. Picture a warfighter that is in hour 6 of their mission. They're starting to get tired, the weather is getting bad, and enemy forces are moving in unexpected ways. Well, our warfighter is working with an AI sidekick, that embodied agent that they have trained with and now are deployed with. that agent, that sidekick, actually relies on all of those different sensor data that are being collected and analyzed in real time and can predict, using that digital twin of the warfighter, they can predict the levels of risks in the near future. And based on that, then can task other AI agents to actually figure out, well, what should the intervention be? What type of support should I provide at the cognitive or at the physical level? Should I recommend that they eat something? Should I recommend a task reallocation? Should I alert somebody? Should I change the type of information that they are getting at that particular instant? So that agent, that sidekick, really understand very deeply what works and what doesn't work. Amy was talking about the flow, right? You can understand with this kind of architecture what are the triggers and the patterns of engagements and context that actually drive to that flow. Can the agent then mimic or push towards that direction to get the warfighter in the flow? This happens in operations with deep trust from the operator or the warfighter because they know their sidekick, just like a buddy. They train together. They've gone through the training and the motion and the missions before together, and now they are out there and they understand each other and they can be effective together. Now, when they go back to training, all of those learnings that happen in the operational environment can feed back into intelligent tutoring, into customization of scenarios to specifically address those gaps that the sidekick may have noticed during operations and then re-inject in that loop. So at this point, I would be remiss not to mention J.C.R. Licklider, who in 1960 wrote a really important paper called Man-Machine Symbiosis. And in it, he says, the hope is that in not too many years, human and computing machines will be tightly coupled. And I think we're getting close to having all of those technologies that do allow us to do that tight coupling for higher performance, as long as we bridge those two disconnects of the mind and body and of operations and training. So how do we go from silos to this symbiosis that Licklider was talking about? Well, I think first our military leaders need to continue pushing for the single pipeline of training to operations and ensuring that we have policies that provide mechanisms to transfer the information from one to the next. And the continuity of readiness is a key concept here that needs to be reinforced. On the acquisition community, we need to fund integration, not just innovation. There is a lot out there, a lot of companies like Nirim who are doing phenomenal work, but everybody is separate and we're not integrating already when we should be. And I think that's a key part that needs to advance. And finally, for us, the research and engineering community, we need to converge those kinds of technologies and bring what we are doing in that single loop into a cognosomatic loop. Now, I will leave you with this. On the battlefield, it doesn't matter whether your fatigue is coming from your brain or your back. What matters is that you are ready. It matters that you are capable of addressing what's coming at you. And right now, we are operating without all of the picture that could support that. So I believe that we are ready to build that cognosomatic loop to get into very high-performing human AI teaming, and I think that's the next best thing. Thank you.
All right, we have plenty of time for questions for Sylvain.
Good day, Commander Max Moshe with the Royal Canadian Navy. Human beings are by and large emotional, sometimes rational. I'm often reminded of that. So with all of the discussions we've had this morning, we haven't talked about emotions a lot. Mm-hmm. Are they inferred? Can we still measure them? Or is it kind of a blind spot in all of this?
So it's not a blind spot. Actually, I should have mentioned as part of the compound AI systems, ethical, legal, and social implications, LC, for those who know that acronym. We have LC agents and multiple companies, not just Aptima, multiple people are looking at that, and we can embed agents that are specifically looking at that. I think there was a question earlier about the legal decisions or the responsibility and authority that can be embedded in the reasoning there. On the emotional part, very specifically, there is research for DARPA that we've been doing that is about simulating populations and in particular emotional reactions to campaigns of disinformation. So we have the capacity now to embed agents that can capture and then predict the likely emotional response or effect response to certain triggers. Mostly in this case, it's like multimodal information consumption, because we're talking about cognitive warfare, but it can be different under other circumstances. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
So I think just now someone mentioned in the previous talk, don't make cheap tech better, right? You should make the best tech cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the same applies for human performance, where I think right now we're trying to make things easier for soldiers, but we shouldn't make training easier using technology, right? We should train them hard, we should give them the best training, and then we sharpen the already very well-trained soldier with technology. So that issue of measurability, especially when it comes to human performance, all these simulation techniques, I assume you're using some Monte Carlo simulations on
That's one approach.
population studies and stuff. How do you measure that success? Because it's for example, okay, let's say I go to a buffet, right, and my performance is I can eat 12 lobsters. Okay, that's measurable. But like in the case of human performance, how do you measure that success in a statistical manner? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Sure. So I will provide an answer, but it's going to be very unsatisfactory, I think. But I can put you in touch with our chief AI scientist who has, I know, a very good answer to that, because the point of that DARPA program I was talking about is specifically closing that loop with evaluation and when do we know we are successful. Generally, so my poor answer is, it depends. It depends on the case, it depends on the context in which you are operating, but there are always some very specific mission metrics that can be leveraged. So the question is, are you achieving the objective? Are you achieving commander's intent? Are you getting to where you need to be? That we are able to combine that into agentic AI and track that through the various types of system and data streams that we can get our hands on.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So just now you mentioned you ran some simulations, right? So when you run all these, like for example, Monte Carlo simulations, stochastic simulations, how do you know that there must be some kind of discussion with the end user, who's probably not a very technical person, especially when you're working with military personnel. So there's always that tension between the tech and the non-technical. How do you measure a abstract simulation that at best models after the real world, and probably when you run it through the system, you change the seed, right? And then you find the averages. So how do you know that that is a successful enough high fidelity simulation that you can tell the end user, okay, you can trust it?
So first, you don't tell end users to trust it. Like, they are going to build their own trust as they use it. But I say the simple answer is you put human factors people in charge. Do we have human factors people in the room? Because one of the key important part is we cannot continue to take the public LLMs and the very advanced tech that's coming out of Silicon Valley and just dumping it on soldiers. That will cause total failure, and we know it already has. We need people who understand what tech integration means and what it means from a deeply rooted understanding of what the work is, what the warfighter is supposed to do, how they get trained, how they operate, what the mental models is, like all of that. And I think human factors people are generally the best place to reconcile those two aspects. As part of that reconciliation process, particularly when you start up the design process, this is where you identify those metrics. I will say, though, that those, you could consider them requirements coming into the system you want to build. But more and more, those requirements may be very uncertain, very vague, or changing and dynamic. The beauty of agentic AI is that you can embed that type of uncertainty and evolution and dynamicity into agentic AI. It can understand that, well, under those circumstances, commander's intent means something slightly different, right? And that variability can be worked out with the operator, with a warfighter in training, and then applied in operations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions.
Hi, you had mentioned how the AI twin can understand, predict, and model their actual person. Taking this to aircrew, one of the biggest factors we see in mishaps is the human factor. So things like spatial disorientation, hypoxia, G-lock, can this be taken to help prevent or recognize, hey, you are hypoxic or you're about to enter into G-lock to predict these incidents?
100%. And actually, we're already doing that without digital twins. So that is technology that exists right now, mostly in the lab, although I know I have a team that's working on trying to transfer that and test that in the actual cockpit. I think Jonathan earlier asked a question. Like those kinds of things, they are very actively researched and understood from an engineering perspective how to solve that problem. Then we get into what was talked about earlier, the acquisition and getting stuff in the hands of the people who need it. I will mention, it is good that you're bringing that up because in my talk I actually forgot to mention that NATO is launching another a human digital twin study group next week, and so I'm part of the panel of experts that's going to be part of it, and I'll bring that specific discussion there for those types of measures. So,
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, we actually do have a question coming in from Slido. So, Sylvain, what are the challenges in implementing this sidekick as you stated? Do you think it's a technological problem, an emotional problem, a trust problem? How do you categorize that?
It's an acquisition problem. I think that's a default answer, right, in this space. I think there are a number of hurdles. I think the first one is going to be computing at the edge, right? That's not my area. I know the Army with NGC2 is completely revolutionizing the network and how they are bringing those types of capabilities out there. That work needs to happen. Everything I'm talking about, everything that we've heard from other presenters assumes that we have a safe, secure compute capability at the edge for whatever or wherever the warfighter is at. But I think that needs to happen first to give that the capacity. I will say computing at the edge in terms of the power needed, all of that are solvable problems that are being solved by a lot of or the organizations, so companies, research institutions, and universities. So I think that is one big thing that needs to happen. I think to get to a point of embedded, embodied AI agents, we need a combination of the top-down leadership saying that, yes, we need those technologies out there and maximizing the use of the data we collect to drive performance across the board. But we also need the bottom-up from warfighters who are saying, look, I'm using in my daily work this kind of stuff on the side, or in my, at home I use this thing. Why don't I have that as well in my cockpit or in my vehicle or in my work? I think the combination of those demand signals is really what's going to move the needle. So that's why I'm here trying to say, it is all possible. Let's converge and get it done.
So AI are people, crazy statement, but when you're giving like an AI companion, AI helper to the warfighter, and they're depending on it, trying to trust it over this time, how do we gauge some of the more psychological effects as they, sometimes it can be difficult to even discern if that AI is a person or not, or for instance, if it were to be upgraded to the next version, it would suddenly act differently, and then there's going to be a lot of dissonance there. How do you think we can address that in the future?
Yes, excellent question, and it reminds me of the question you asked earlier about drift. Actually, I hate to say it, but compound AI systems can help with that. So with having specific orchestration AIs that are looking for the drift and that analyzing and bringing it up and reconciling what can be done to minimize the impact. That's one way. On the psychological aspect and potentially the change in trust from one version to the next, I trust our warfighters to understand the machine that they're working with. Like, they know this is not a human. And I think we talk a lot about trust in our community, in the human AI teaming community, but trust to me is an empty word because it's really about the impact of trust or not trust and the dynamicity of the trust and the repair of the trust that needs to be not hard-coded, but present in the software architecture. So when I was talking about that example of the sidekick that's telling the warfighter, hey, you're tired, like stuff is moving, you might want to consider ABC. By having that same sidekick in training, it can learn what is the level of depth of explanation or the type of information or the type of approach, like, well, they'd rather see it on a screen versus heard in their ear, versus, so the multimodality of engagement can be varied and adapted to that specific individual, because the AI can learn over time what it is that works best for that particular person. We also need to, and I know most folks here know that, but everybody knows that AI can fail. And we need to embed in the AI, in that agentic or compound AI system, the way to say, I don't know, I'm not sure. Because from talking with warfighters, they'd rather hear that from their buddy than something that is totally made up and may not serve them. So deliberately addressing that with different kinds of agents in the software infrastructure is, I think, a way to answer your question.
Thank you.
Yep.
Last question. So I was thinking about what you mentioned about, and someone mentioned in the previous talk also, to shorten that decision time. Speed is king, right? I mean, you don't want, and speed costs lives, either that or money. So in operational context, there's the OODA loop, right? So between the orientation and decision steps of the OODA loop, either the operator on the ground or even someone who's doing streaming or screening in an ops room, okay? There's always that OODA loop being run. So that gap between the orientation and decision is what we call the decision latency. Now, what I noticed is that if I speak from an operator perspective, when I used to wear like night vision goggles, I look through the night vision and I realize I can't trust this. I take it out.
Yeah.
I give it up altogether. Now we look at the on the ground. Say you have a longer lead time in screening processes in Air Force. They look at the output. They say, "Can I trust this?" They throw it out. Right? It always goes back to, "Can I trust it?" And then, you know what? I'm just going to do it myself. This is going to happen. How do we prevent that? Yeah.
So I would go back to some of the things I said earlier about the proactive monitoring and calibration of trust. So there is a lot of research that has been done. I know I have one team that actually worked on trust calibration for the Air Force, looking at that and understanding where the limits are. And I think it is about being honest about what the capabilities of the system is, and that the AI itself is capable of being truthful about its own limitations and boundaries of operations. Again, I think the warfighter wants to know the level of certainty when you consume in intelligence. So a lot of the decision support systems I've built were in the intelligence realm. They want to know how sure or the assessment might be, right? And oftentimes there is a percentage associated with it, right? We need that kind of equivalent in engaging with human AI teaming so that they can discard. But there is the difference between not leveraging AI's output and discarding altogether the AI system. So we need to be in a framework where the warfighter can at times say, you know what, I know you're not good at this, so I'm not gonna take that into account. But in others, but not turn off the machine, right? Still keep it because it might be useful in other areas. And that, we cannot treat that as, okay, it's a one-time thing at this point, it's another time thing at that other point. There needs to be this continuum of engagement so that relationship, just like with another human being, actually develops. Does that make sense? And I appreciate the mention of the OODA loop, because I alluded to that with the workflows and being understanding of the workflows. I also recognize that there are a lot of use cases, let's say with hypersonics, where sometimes there is autonomy that is added there as yet another layer of complexity. I didn't touch upon that, but that's also one of the big things that we need as a community to look at. So, appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.